Too many people in America fear their government, and the government is being run by too many powerful agencies like the IRS and others. I think it's time the people take the country back through their representative government.
You are listening to an American Free Press podcast. The complete reading of American Free Press Weekly Newspaper, number 45, November 7th, 2011. Busting the Bankers by Frank Whalen. What would happen if every American withdrew their money from major global-oriented banks and then deposited it in neighborhood credit unions or local financial institutions? To then send an even clearer message, what if these transactions occurred on November 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, a date made famous by the rebellious Hollywood movie V for Vendetta? Such a notion has been labeled Bank Transfer Day, and it is the brainchild of Kristen Christian, a 27-year-old art gallery owner from California, who wrote on her Facebook page, "I started this because I felt like many of you do. I was tired of the fee increases, tired of not being able to access my money when I need to, tired of them using what little money I have to oppress my brothers and sisters." With tensions on the rise and financial unrest exemplified by the Occupy Wall Street protests, Bank Transfer Day is intended as a peaceful boycott of megabanks. Kristen stated that such a bank run isn't potentially damaging to the economy, as she is advocating people simply remove their money from large banking institutions and place it in a credit union. She explained, "How can your funds have a positive impact on your community if tucked under your mattress? What's being suggested is that you shift your money to a local not-for-profit credit union. The more business credit unions have, the more loans with low rates they'll be able to offer to small and medium-sized businesses." While not affiliated with the Occupy Wall Street movement, Kristen is clear there is a mutual respect. The difference seems to be that she is seeking a clear and definable action easily implemented, while the Occupy Wall Street crowd seems to risk injury and police brutality to merely be present there. However, there are already stories of arrests being made as customers attempt to withdraw their own money. According to Washington's blog, protesters were arrested when they tried to close their Citibank accounts. They continued. Bank of America used police and reportedly SWAT teams to stop St. Louis Bank of America customers from closing their accounts. The following rationale was offered in at least one case. A Bank of America branch in Santa Cruz refused to let protesters close their accounts, saying they cannot be protesters and customers at the same time. November 5th was chosen as Bank Transfer Day because, Kristen hopes, this will give a new name to the 5th of November, not as a failed terrorist attack, but as Americans standing up and saying, "We've had enough," the Village Voice wrote on October 7th. Kristen also told the Village Voice, "I've been very careful to state that this is not about bringing down the Fed. This is not an act of terrorism or treason. It's a boycott. It's as simple as that." It remains to be seen if the powers that be will try to thwart Bank Transfer Day and crack down on the Occupy Wall Street movement. In V for Vendetta, the protagonist reminds viewers of this famous nursery rhyme inspired by his actions. "Remember, remember, the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treason, and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot." Page 2, personal from the editor. Big AFP event November 16th. On November 16th, AFP will be hosting a historic, once-in-a-lifetime conference pairing revisionist historian David Irving with one of the most courageous men in the truth movement, Tex Mars. In last week's issue, Vince Ryan provided an extensive overview of Mr. Irving's career, recounting how this author, imprisoned simply for providing an alternative version of the Holocaust, has broken many other barriers too. Appearing with Irving is a man especially beloved by everyone at AFP. Not only is Tex the most prolific writer about conspiracy of all time, he's also one of the great broadcasters with a booming, resonant voice and a beaming smile. When Tex stands at the podium, audiences are in for a special treat. But don't let his welcoming presence fool you. Here is also an individual who has confronted taboo subjects and provocative issues for over 2 decades. Where others fear to tread, Tex marches ahead unflinchingly. Plus, the breadth of his output is truly astounding. His profile in Conspiracy Hall of Fame covers just a few of the topics Tex has focused on: forbidden knowledge, mysterious symbols, black science, secret brotherhoods, universal human control systems, and approaching days of chaos. It's fair to say that in Tex we have an American national treasure, an individual who has changed the way we view history by exposing the hidden elements that rule our world. Better yet, Tex isn't afraid to specifically identify the most dangerous cabals of all, including those pulling the strings in Israel. In a world increasingly plagued by political correctness and timidity, for this one contribution alone, Tex should be given the utmost respect. As an extra added bonus, the master of ceremonies at this conference is none other than Michael Collins Piper, who, it goes without saying, will provide his own brand of entertainment and knowledge. Anyone who has listened to world traveler Piper on the radio knows that to hear him tell stories and anecdotes that span his years in the Patriot movement is undoubtedly a unique experience. If readers choose to attend only one event this year, AFP's writers, editors, and employees urge you to come and meet these fantastic speakers. It's guaranteed you'll leave this event thankful to have been in their presence and to have benefited from their years of wisdom. Victor Thorne, Assignment Editor. News you may have missed. 9% approval rating for Congress. A new poll conducted by the New York Times and CBS shows that distrust of government is at its highest level ever, with only a 9% approval rating. Almost 100% of those polled said that the economic outlook is dark and are particularly concerned about the lack of jobs. The government could be trusted once, said one respondent, but now it seems like a game of who wins rather than what's best for the people. Republican control of the House has not boosted optimism as congressional approval has dropped 22 more points since then. Nearly 3/4 of those polled feel that Congress will fail to reach agreement on a plan to help create jobs. DoD criminals. Defense fraud is totally out of control. Since the war in Iraq started in 2003, tens of billions of dollars sent to Iraq has vanished into thin air. Until 2008, over $40 billion sent for reconstruction is missing. In the first 2 years of the war alone, 363 tons of cash straight from the Federal Reserve was shipped out of Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, D.C. to Baghdad International Airport, never to be seen again. The privately owned Fed won't reveal its records because by law they don't have to, and Congress can't do anything about it because the Fed owns them. So the money keeps vanishing while Americans watch television. Occupy Wall Street violence. Police in Oakland, California reacted violently after more than 500 protesters took to the streets to protest Wall Street. On October 25th, after an especially trying day, police officers dressed in riot gear launched tear gas and flashbang grenades into crowds of people, injuring an estimated 100 demonstrators. One protester, 24-year-old Iraq war veteran Scott Olson, was reportedly hit in the head with some form of projectile fired by the police and suffered a fractured skull and brain swelling. As American Free Press went to press, Olson was still unconscious and in intensive care in an Oakland hospital. Banker gets jail. The highest-ranking executive charged in a nationwide crackdown on shady insider trading was indicted for conspiracy and securities fraud and is likely facing 10 years behind bars. It should come as no surprise that the accused is former Goldman Sachs director Rajat K. Gupta. The Wall Street Bank is considered by many to be one of the major culprits responsible for the financial fraud infestation. Foreclosure beware. A new ruling by Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court will make it harder for banks in the state to foreclose on homes. In the case Bevilacqua versus Rodriguez, the state's highest court ruled that Francis Bevilacqua, who bought a foreclosed home from U.S. Bank in 2006, never actually received the title to the property because the bank sold it before it had even finalized the foreclosure. Today, thanks to Wall Street, it is difficult for many banks to prove ownership because original titles to properties get lost when they are sold repeatedly among competing banks or bundled together and sold in bulk. 1%ers. A new study by the Congressional Budget Office shows that the top wealthiest 1% of America nearly tripled their share of the country's income in the past 3 decades. Meanwhile, 3/5 of Americans in the middle class have seen their income only increase by 40% in the past 30 years. Contrast that with the cost of living, which has risen by more than 209% in that same time. CEO pay. Despite the global economic downturn, the pay for top bankers and corporate executives has never been better. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon took home a $19 million pay raise in 2010. Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein pulled in an extra $3.6 million in bonuses last year, earning about $100 million in cash, stock, and other options. Cisco Computer Systems CEO John Chambers took in $19 million. Israel visit. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie announced the location of his first official overseas trip, Israel. Maybe he can explain to Garden State voters how a family trip to the Zionist state will benefit them as they continue to suffer with nearly 10% unemployment. 2 heads are better than 1. The drug cartels are out of control in Mexico. 2 severed heads were left across the street from Mexico City's Army headquarters in early October with a note from Mano con Ojos, the gang responsible. Decapitations are becoming commonplace in Mexico. Are Mexican gangs regressing to their Aztec ways? Maybe they'll start cutting out hearts and eating them. Having a gay old time. Gays are on a roll lately. Gay marriages are approved by states, the military now allows gays openly, schools promote the merits of homosexuality, and gays and lesbians are becoming federal judges and Supreme Court justices. It's a gay old time to be in America. Correction, in AFP's October 24th edition, American Free Press had the picture of former CIA Director Michael Hayden, misidentified as Thomas Hayden in the caption, but not the article. Page 3, AFP on the Global Elite. Global Elite Nervous About Populists by James P. Tucker, Jr. From Berlin to Brussels to Paris to Washington, international money changers are grumpy because patriots are loudly protesting their criminal conduct across Europe and North America. Finance ministers from the 27-nation European Union were meeting in Brussels in late October. Collateral meetings were held in Berlin, Paris, and Washington, all dealing with means of extracting more from American taxpayers to advance their goal of a global government with a World Treasury Department. But they are outraged that protests against the global government that originated in Washington, New York, and Chicago, then spread to the West Coast and Europe, received extensive publicity in newspapers and broadcast outlets. Comments of gloom were reported to AFP by people who were present. On October 25th, Bilderberg luminary and Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner expressed anger at yahoos in the streets while visiting a factory in North Carolina. The world wants to see the details of a plan to avoid global catastrophe, he said. Geithner has long supported with his Bilderberg buddies a World Treasury Department. On October 24th, Charles Dallara, managing director of the Institute of International Finance, told a crony that those expletive-deleted street bums could frustrate our efforts to fix the world economy. A significant portion of the street bums are lawyers, physicians, and other men of letters. Lifting his voice, among many calling for a World Treasury Department, Dallara said, "Any approach that is not based on cooperative discussion and involves unilateral actions would be tantamount to default, would isolate the Greek economy from international capital markets for many years. It would also likely have severe contagion effects which would cost the European and world economy dearly. Those street people could ruin everything," said French President Nicolas Sarkozy as he arrived for a meeting in Brussels October 22nd. "We have to find a solution, but the hostile publicity could ruin our efforts. Bad publicity caused by protesters in Europe and North America could block our efforts to save the world from another recession. They are expletive deleted," said George Osborne, Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, as he left the meeting the same day. "We have made real progress, but could fail because of those expletives in the streets." German Chancellor Angela Merkel has an especially difficult problem with protesters, as throngs have gathered in Berlin and other cities. "They make it politically difficult to do anything because Germans pick up most of the tab," she said. New studies from the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund provide a bleak outlook for Greece. The nation's decaying finances left the European ministers with the choice of asking private bondholders to accept heavy losses on their loans to Greece, or putting up hundreds of billions of their own taxpayers' money, beyond already approved bailouts, to keep the country afloat. Ministers hope to have a coherent proposal ready in time for the Group of 20 meeting of world leaders November 3rd in Brussels. Page 4, AFP on the anti-Wall Street movement. Occupy Wall Street movement wants to kill Federal Reserve by Mark Anderson. As the Occupy Wall Street OWS movement tries to sustain and refine itself, moving beyond heated frustration with the status quo, ideas with more long-range ramifications unavoidably will be brought forth. One such idea is the creation of local currencies, scrip, to offset the chronic shortfall of Federal Reserve money. Several local currencies, such as Ithaca Hours in upstate New York and Unity in Canada, with plans to extend Unity to Ann Arbor, Michigan, have taken root over the years, showing up well before the current economic calamity set in so severely that the customary means the ruling 1% had long used to mask their malicious practices from a largely unsuspected populace started to fail. Finally, the curtain was raised, allowing light to pierce the cushioned, insular world of the financial overlords. Those who take the time to truly understand what they are witnessing can learn a great deal about how to constructively fight back. As more and more people discern the score and see a true picture of where they stand, then the question of what to do about our grand dilemma of living in a plutonomy, an economy of, by, and for the super-rich, cannot help but take center stage sooner or later. Could local scrip be part of the solution, even as a stopgap measure to improve the lot of the average person until something better can be instituted? AFP found that OWS protesters are studying this option. Matt Lepacek of We Are Change New York, who participated with this reporter and others in a news cooperative that exposed the Bilderberg meeting of VIP plutocrats in Switzerland this year, said that in the protesters' own New York General Assembly, NYGA, which meets daily in South Manhattan, scrip is being discussed. "We're working with different models on how to apply that," Lepacek informed AFP. Lepacek, who revealed that the NYGA is sustaining itself with a sizable monetary donation, reportedly from a number of small donors, said that what's described described as a food-based currency has been considered in conjunction with plans to create more community gardens, a national movement that is growing widely, having taken root especially strong in Detroit amid massive house demolitions at cleared acres of land. Borrowing a page from the Amish, the fundamental goal, said Lepacek, is to create a non-profit, private social safety net that enables the average person to take part in and benefit from local agriculture and then use any currency that might stem from it. An essential consideration is more self-sufficiency for a population vulnerable to large financial interests that have undue influence in who gets elected to office and what policies elected officials approve. While the local currency concept among NYGA participants is in its early stages, Lepacek added that the practice of fractional reserve banking is being wrapped to make it more widely known that commercial banks loan out much more checkbook money than the small percentage of cash they are required to keep in their vaults. Is Occupy Wall Street movement being sabotaged by Victor Thorne? Are the first signs of agent provocateur infiltrations beginning to surface in the Occupy Wall Street OWS movement? Activists in Denver certainly feel that their rallies have been compromised, whereas OWS protesters in New York City have not been forced by authorities to vacate Zuccotti Park. The same can't be said in Denver. On October 17th, Chris Steele of Denver's Progressive Examiner told this writer, "At the last big OWS protest, eyewitnesses told me that they saw these punk rock-looking kids holding signs getting out of police cars. Some of them wore bandanas around their faces before getting lost in the General Assembly." When asked what happened next, Steele replied, "These kids deliberately tried to split up the crowd and have them go in different directions. Then the cops came in and tore down tents and threw away donated food where a people's kitchen had been set up." According to Steele, their tactics proved effective. The infiltrators were very aggressive. They created confusion and split up the crowd. The following day, AFP spoke with activist Tim Holland. When questioned about individuals taunting police, he began, "I don't think they were working for the government, but probably hired by major corporations." Similar to Steele, Holland also referred to an element of aggression. Organizers have complained about being followed non-stop and literally being chased by people in plain clothes. Holland then made a profound observation. "I wonder if the same forces that found it so important to hijack the Tea Party are the same ones who are trying to destroy the Occupy movement." To convey the agitation in Denver, on October 12th, a line of police officers adorned with riot gear and face shields and carrying nightsticks lined up only feet away from rows of protesters in a heated standoff. Later that night, the officers dismantled tents in a makeshift medical center cum food kitchen dubbed the Thunderdome. If provocateurs are searching for a modern-day Kent state, they may find it in Denver. Page 6, AFP Behind the Scenes. Russia, Iran work to thwart CIA drug running, by Bill White. The efforts of Russia and Iran to stop CIA-backed militias from trafficking opium from Afghanistan are leading to geopolitical tensions, as the cash-strapped U.S. agency has seen the erosion of a major source of funds for its worldwide anti-Islamic and anti-nationalist campaigns. Earlier this month, the UN named Iran as the country's most vigorously and successfully involved in combating international drug trafficking, noting that it was responsible for the interception of over 80% of the opium being trafficked through its borders into Russia and states formerly part of the Soviet Union. According to their report, opium is being smuggled from Afghanistan into the Zionist entity occupying Palestine and to Jewish mafia groups operating in Russia, where it is being transformed into a high-grade form of heroin that is being sold cheaply on the streets of Moscow and other major Eastern European and other Eurasian cities. Though not stated in the UN report, Russia and Iranian sources have recently complained that the CIA and Mossad are controlling opium and heroin traffic coming out of Afghanistan. This assertion that the recent influx of high-grade heroin into Russia from Afghanistan is largely part of an American and Jewish conspiracy to destabilize the country by encouraging drug abuse has appeared in Russian media. In 2008, the United States cut off UN funds for Iranian efforts to stop drug trafficking out of Iran and asked for international sanctions against Iranian anti-drug trafficking efforts. Some observers believe the real reason behind this move was because Iranian anti-drug trafficking efforts were too effective in undermining funding for American and Jewish intelligence services. Recently, tensions have expanded between the United States and Iran after the United States, ironically, attempted to frame several senior Iranian Quds Force officials for a drug trafficking assassination scheme. They ended up framing a U.S. citizen of Iranian descent for a phony plot to kill a Saudi ambassador. The transformation of political insurgents into drug-dealing cartels is part of an American policy stated explicitly in the U.S. Army's training manual for counterinsurgency, available at any major bookseller. Transforming political insurgents into economically motivated criminal groupings is intended to diffuse potentially disrupted forces opposed to one world rule. This tactic was used in the United States against black criminal gangs that became politicized by communist forces in the 60s and 70s, but were largely converted into crack cocaine dealing organizations by the CIA in the 80s and 90s. Drug abuse in the United States has largely coincided with CIA efforts to destabilize foreign governments abroad. In the 70s and 80s, heroin became prominent as the CIA sought to finance guerrilla groups in Afghanistan, but heroin abuse decreased as the CIA shifted its focus to Latin America late in the 1980s and early in the 1990s, replacing heroin with crack cocaine. Now that the CIA is active again in Central Asia, heroin abuse is on the rise while anti-drug Islamic governments the CIA opposes are toppled and replaced with drug-financed militias. Will Hackers Become Next Perpetual Enemy by Keith Johnson. Savvy computer hackers may soon have the ability to target America's industrial control systems, ICSs, and bring down critical infrastructure like power plants, electrical grids, and water treatment facilities, according to a cybersecurity bulletin from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. Issued on September 16th and classified for official use only, the bulletin places significant emphasis on a group known only as Anonymous, a loosely organized computer hacking collective that has claimed responsibility for a number of high-profile cyber attacks on diverse organizations like Sony, the Church of Scientology, and dozens of law enforcement agencies throughout the United States. Though DHS claims that Anonymous has recently expressed their intention to target ICSs, they do not believe the group has yet demonstrated the capability of inflicting serious damage. However, according to their bulletin, experienced and skilled members of Anonymous could be able to develop capabilities to gain access and trespass on control system networks very quickly. The bulletin points out that certain control systems are already accessible from the internet. These systems could be easily located and accessed with minimal skills in order to trespass, carry out nefarious activities, or conduct reconnaissance activities to be used in future operations. One of three examples that DHS uses to substantiate their claim that Anonymous has expressed an interest in comprising control systems is an internet posting by a suspected member who boasts about a denial of service attack on seed giant Monsanto. They then discuss ways the group could inflict further financial harm on the company. Many cybersecurity pundits who have analyzed the bulletin believe the examples cited by DHS do not adequately support their claim that Anonymous poses a credible threat to ICSs, and that there may be a more sinister agenda at work. Writing in SC magazine, a journal for IT security professionals, Dan Kaplan stated, "In my eyes, this seems to be another step by U.S. officials, without exactly coming out and saying it, to label Anonymous as a cyber terrorist organization bent on indiscriminate destruction of digital property and infrastructure. If what Kaplan says is true, we may soon find Anonymous conveniently blamed for all manner of cyber attacks, even those emanating from a new, recently discovered version of the dreaded Stuxnet virus." On October 20th, Agence France-Presse reported, analysts at U.S. firms McAfee and Symantec agreed that a sophisticated virus dubbed Dooku has been unleashed on an apparent mission to gather intelligence for future attacks on industrial control systems. The article went on to say, Dooku's purpose is to gather intelligence data and assets from entities such as industrial control system manufacturers in order to more easily conduct a future attack against another third party. The original Stuxnet virus was first discovered in June 2010, and it is widely believed that the malicious worm was created as a result of a joint American-Israeli effort to sabotage Iran's nuclear program. Page 8, Across the Nation. 25th White Pride Festival is major success in Tennessee by Paul Fromm. Pulaski, Tennessee. The March of Pride stretched out more than a city block here. Over 100 patriots, two from as far away as Canada, marched behind a fluttering sea of flags of their European homelands on a crisp autumn day to celebrate European achievements and pride. The 25th Annual European American Heritage Festival was pronounced a solid success by organizer Pastor Thomas Robb of the Christian Revival Center in Harrison, Arkansas. The event started 25 years ago to protest plans to proclaim Martin Luther King Day. In recent years, it morphed into a celebration of pride in the European founding and settler people of the United States. The event featured literature tables, tables displaying T-shirts with a goodly display of Confederate memorabilia, and tables with home crafts and jewelry. For the first time, there was a custom and antique car show. Lively music was provided by Heritage Connection, Charity Dunscombe, and Shelby Pendergraft, Rob's granddaughters who have just brought out their 4th CD. The purpose of the European American Heritage Festival is to offer an opportunity to European Americans, white Americans, to demonstrate love for their heritage, people, and culture, explained Rob. We gather here to exercise free speech in this beautiful Tennessee town founded by our white ancestors, Rachel Pendergraft, the master of ceremonies, told the crowd gathered in the spacious parking lot of the Giles County Courthouse. Every single signer of the Declaration of Independence was of European descent, Rob told the crowd. This is our land, he added. It was your forefathers who faced savage Indians, tilled the soil, and irrigated parched land, once considered worthless, and made it produce food to feed the nation and to feed many others. It was your forefathers who harnessed the forces of nature. The reason the politically correct hate you, Rob explained, is because the moment you become proud again, you become a conqueror again. Europeans came to this continent as free men, not as slaves or sneaking across another people's border. Our frontier was their New England, a European country, he added. White students are ashamed that they have no culture. They are told by those who wish our genocide that they have no groove, soul, or rhythm, he said. But out of the European blood of our ancestors came waltzes, symphonies, classical, and country music. While others were banging on a hollow log, our European ancestors were making pianos and guitars. What happened to the republic given to us by our white forefathers, Rob wondered. He reminded the festival attendees that coming out of Independence Hall in Philadelphia after signing the Declaration of Independence, a then-aged Benjamin Franklin was confronted by a woman who demanded, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us?" "Lady," Franklin replied, "we have given you a republic, if you can keep it." In a stirring conclusion to his remarks, Rob reminded the crowd, "The 5th commandment says, 'Honor thy father and thy mother, that your days may be long upon the land.' If we lose it now, it will be because of our failure to love our heritage, to love our people, and to do our duty." The festival attracted a film crew from New York City and a reporter from French television channel Plus, who had traveled from Paris specifically to cover this aspect of American politics. Festival sponsors included American Free Press and the Barnes Review, The Derek Black Show, broadcaster James Edwards and the Political Cesspool, Reason Radio Network, the Abundant Life Fellowship, author and broadcaster Dr. Tomislav Sunic, and the Canadian Association for Free Expression. Page 9, Spotlight on Congress. Super Congress in the Pockets of Lobbyists by Victor Thorne. Cloaked in secrecy and charged with finding $1.5 trillion in deficit cuts by a November 23rd deadline, the Congressional Super Committee appears to be firmly in the pocket of lobbyists. Doubts are beginning to grow inside the Beltway that the 12-member panel will be stalled by gridlock and therefore request a dreaded extension. If the 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans fail in their efforts, cuts will automatically kick in across the board, including $600 billion slashed from military spending. Most unnerving to those on Capitol Hill is a tight-lipped, closed-door mentality surrounding the Super Committee. This hands-off approach is so widespread that when co-chairs Patty Murray, Democrat Washington, and Jeb Hensarling, Republican Texas, recently met with House Speaker John Boehner, Republican Ohio, and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Democrat Nevada, Nancy Pelosi was not only excluded, her office didn't even receive notification. Insiders speculate that this brush-off is a result of an ongoing power struggle between Reid and Pelosi. Conversely, there is one contingent that appears to enjoy unlimited special access, namely lobbyists. Whether it's the AARP, big oil, defense contractors, green energy companies, healthcare plan proponents, bankers, or union leaders, a revolving door is wide open to Super Committee staff members. As market commentator Tim Iacono wrote on October 17th, "If you want to find out what the committee is doing, ask a lobbyist." With the countdown now underway and a deadline looming, one other factor enters the equation. If lawmakers aren't successful in meeting their goal, the U.S. could suffer another credit downgrade. It is for this reason that the much-vaunted Gang of Six are urging their counterparts to not stop at $1.5 trillion in cuts, but instead shoot for $3.7 trillion in deficit reductions. Typically, when the Gang of Six meet with the 12-member Super Committee, their sessions were held in private. Page 10, AFP Underground interview with Dave Gahary. Controlled Big Media ignores this presidential candidate by Dave Gahary. Buddy Roemer, former governor and 4-term congressman from Louisiana, has thrown his hat into the ring for the 2012 presidential election. The major problem for Roemer in regard to his chances of occupying the Oval Office is that few people know that he's in the race since he's been locked out of Republican debates by the powers that be. If the former chief executive of the Bayou State is allowed to deliver his populist message to America, it's safe to say he would steal the show from a slate of cardboard cutouts now given primetime coverage to address the nation. It's also safe to say that the military military-industrial banking media complex knows this, and they fear his message. On October 16th, American Free Press conducted an exclusive interview with Romer. Romer isn't your typical professional politician. Entering Harvard at the age of 16, he graduated with an MBA at 23. Upon graduation, he went on to found not one, but two banks. Attracted to stamping out corruption in politics, Romer left private life and served the 4th District from 1981 to 1988, then served as the 52nd governor of Louisiana from 1988 to 1992. Dismayed by what he saw as the wholesale corruption of Louisiana's political system, he switched political parties halfway through his term because, as he said, the legislature was 97% Democratic, and that does not foster debate or transparency or fight corruption. I'm the only governor in American history to change parties while in office, explained Romer. A fundraiser a day. Romer's campaigns were unique in that he took no money from political action committees or PACs. I was elected 4 times to Congress and never took any PAC money. I didn't get a single political endorsement when I ran for governor, he said. AFP asked Romer why he decided to run since he's been out of public office for nearly 2 decades. Apparently his quest for the presidency began while searching for a presidential candidate to support. I started looking for a candidate, he explained. Hell, I couldn't find anybody. They were all corporate people that took million-dollar checks, or they had been in political office election after election after election, and they were married to the corrupt system. Washington has become so expensive and the lust for power is so great that elected men and women don't serve their constituents as they once did. They really serve the need to raise money. There's a fundraiser a day in Washington, he lamented. The problem is Washington, D.C., explained Romer. I'll take a broom and sweep it out as president. Romer's 2 issues are corruption and jobs. Corruption because of money in politics, and jobs because of unfair trade policies. I went to China as a businessman and banker while serving my clients in America, he said. I found out that trade was very unfair. You couldn't get one of our products into China, yet their products were overrunning our stores. Plus, children and prison labor were producing their goods. They were made under working conditions that would be illegal in this country, yet we let them come in with no tariffs or taxes. He continued, for 160 years, from George Washington to Theodore Roosevelt, we protected our manufacturers from unfair competition. After World War II, we decided not to do that. It's killing America. So I saw all these things plus the power of special interest money, and I said, you know, I think somebody ought to run for president who's free to tell the truth. Once having told it, then they're free to lead. Romer started his campaign with $50,000 of his own money and accepts political contributions from Americans with a strict limit. At a $100 limit, I have raised money from all 50 states. California is a big giver to me, plus Florida and Texas, explained Romer. My average contribution is $65, he said. Romer's message would be sure to find millions of supporters across the country who are fed up with business as usual. But he has yet to be invited to the Republican debates. I haven't made a single debate yet, bemoans Romer, although I'm the only guy running for president who was elected to Congress and as governor of his state. I find it interesting that I can't make the national debate, while the same old guys are saying the same old things. Why can't I make a debate? It might be because I don't take PAC money and they don't want that conversation to be held on the national stage. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's because I'm 2% in the polls, but came in 7th place in Florida last week ahead of 3 people who were in the debate. I was ahead of Rick Santorum, John Huntsman, and Gary Johnson. I'm the only guy running who hasn't made a debate. Fascinating. If he is invited to the debates, Romer is confident. You think Herman Cain was something? In 30 days he went from 3% to 30%. Watch me, guys. If we get on the debate, watch what happens. Romer's campaign office is located at 66 Hanover Street, Suite 200, Manchester, New Hampshire, 03101, 603-782-4812. Page 11, AFP on freedom of speech. Schoolteacher Persecuted for Her Beliefs by Victor Thorne. Patricia McAllister is a hero, and she stands as the undisputed reigning champion of free speech in America. Her Rosa Parks moment arrived on October 12th when, during an Occupy Los Angeles rally, Reason TV recorded her on camera saying, "I'm here representing myself, but I do work for the Los Angeles Unified School District, LAUSD. I think the Zionist Jews who are running these big banks and our Federal Reserve, which is not run by the federal government, need to be run out of this country." On October 18th, LAUSD officials fired McAllister. In an exclusive interview with AFP, McAllister explained her dismissal to this writer. Ira Berman, the Director of Employee Relations for LAUSD, told me, "You're out of a job." When I asked for the reason, he responded, "I don't want to talk about why." Superintendent John Deasy later said in a press release, "We recognize the law is very protective of the freedom of speech rights of public employees when they are speaking as private citizens during non-working time, but we will never stand for behavior that is disrespectful, hateful, intolerant, or discriminatory. This issue became so prominent and explosive that on October 20th, the LA Times devoted an editorial to it. They began, "This newspaper ardently supports the right of free speech, even when that speech is controversial, hateful, or ignorant. But no right is absolute," and Patricia McAllister crossed a line. Their commentary continued with this curious endorsement. On Tuesday, October 18th, Superintendent John Deasy fired her. Good for him. However, in the following paragraph, the editor seemed to backtrack. McAllister was careful to note that she was not speaking as a representative of LA Unified, and Deasy knows as well as anyone that courts have historically and correctly protected teachers' free speech rights. Not surprisingly, after McAllister was terminated for her supposedly anti-Semitic comments, the ADL's LA Regional Director, Amanda Susskind, congratulated Deasy and the school board for their decision. Occupy LA supporters protested in front of LAUSD headquarters following McAllister's dismissal. McAllister on front lines of battle for free speech. During an October 21st interview with AFP, Patricia McAllister exercised her right to free speech to the fullest. Here are her comments. Where she learned about Zionists. "I grew up in Chicago when Jewish people still lived with blacks. They don't do that anymore. Ever since my childhood, I kept asking people, what prompted Adolf Hitler to do what he did? No one had an answer, so I did the research for myself. I discovered why we're in the position we're in today, because of Zionist Jews on the Federal Reserve. 9 Jewish owners, including the Rothschilds, Lazard brothers, Kuhn Loeb, the Warburgs, Lehman, and Goldman Sachs, among others, print money that is backed by nothing. The American people are then taxed to pay interest on money that Zionist Jews put in their pockets. It's called racketeering, and it's illegal. The IRS and Federal Reserve are both illegal, and the taxes they collect from us to pay interest is highway robbery." Fox News 11 quote. On October 18th, during a live telecast, McAllister said, "Jews have been run out of 109 countries throughout history, and we need to run them out of this one." She told AFP, "The Jews have a long history of resentment because people hate them, but they're not hated for being Jews, but due to their behavior. By going in and taking over everything, they've actually destroyed civilizations. When it comes to socialization, the Jews are sociopaths. They won't assimilate. They've been causing problems for years, and we need to expel them from the U.S. They also need to release control of the Federal Reserve, and they can't ever be allowed to come here again. We need to do what Hitler did and run them out of our country. I'm not talking about everyday Jews, but instead Zionists at the Federal Reserve. They're getting more and more ruthless, and we have to do something. I think Hitler saw something that we don't see. I also don't believe that 6 million Jews were killed. That's just something to pull our heartstrings." KTLA Channel 5 quote. On October 18th, McAllister stressed, "Anyone who speaks against the Jews is called racist nowadays. It's not racist, it's the truth." She expanded on these ideas to AFP. "God put this in my heart. This isn't me talking. We can't let the Zionists ruin this world. They're responsible for every perversion, and as a teacher I've seen how they've taken God out of the classroom. Jews are boastful of how significant they are and the power they have in carrying this nation. But what isn't told is how they got their power. By lying, cheating, killing, and swindling. They're a sick people." On the lack of support. "The teachers union isn't rallying around me after I got fired. I did some research and found that Jews have taken over teachers unions across the U.S. The ACLU is run by Zionist Jews too to protect their own interests. They've put all these organizations in place to protect their evil doing and silence anyone that tells the truth about them. But they're not going to silence me. If we can run Zionist Jews out of this nation, we have a chance to save our country." On her legal action. "I plan on suing the LA Unified School District. We must let Americans know they can't intimidate us. My First Amendment rights have been violated, and now it's time to stand up against the Jews who really have power and are putting out a threat among the American people." Page 12, AFP on the judicial system. Verdict in Darren Huff trial has national implications by Pat Shannon. A Tennessee jury deliberated 11 hours before convicting Georgia militia chaplain Darren Huff of transporting in commerce a firearm intended to be used in furtherance of a civil disorder, 18 U.S.C. 231. Huff's court-appointed defense attorney Scott Green said it was a charge that in 25 years of practice I have never before seen them use. The jury acquitted Huff of the additional charge of carrying firearms in relation to a crime of violence, 924C1A. Paralegal Mike Brown of Missouri, who has been assisting Huff, saw the verdict as the normal federal travesty of justice, saying, "A conviction is merely the first step toward a successful appeal." Huff had faced a brutal onslaught of the national news media for 18 months and portrayed him as a gun nut by reporters who typically took their story from government documents and spokesmen without ever interviewing the defendant. Nearly every publication carrying the story said he traveled from Georgia to Tennessee to take take over the courthouse. Huff and other defense witnesses called this allegation ridiculous, and their testimony from the witness stand seemed to show that it was more likely that government prosecutors had created a thought crime from words Huff may or may not have spoken. The story began in March of 2009 when East Tennessee U.S. Attorney William Killian refused to act on the criminal charges of treason filed by Walt Fitzpatrick against sitting President Barack Obama. Instead, Killian sent the Secret Service to investigate Fitzpatrick as a potential terrorist. So the retired naval officer tried a different approach, that of getting the ear of his local grand jury in Madisonville, Tennessee. During multiple failed attempts to be heard, Fitzpatrick discovered corruption and improprieties within the local court system, particularly that of grand jury foreman Gary Petway, who had been serving as judge-appointed foreman for 27 years, while the Tennessee statutes limit service to 1 term. Fitzpatrick and others saw this as a decades-long control by judges to select who would be indicted and who would not. Unable to get any legal cooperation after a year, Fitzpatrick attempted a citizen's arrest on Petway at the courthouse, and Huff witnessed and filmed the proceedings. Fitzpatrick was jailed and charged with multiple counts. His arraignment was set for April 20th, 2010. Planning to attend, Huff had a visit the night before from FBI agent Chuck Reed, who was assured that there were no plans for violence in support of Fitzpatrick. But the next morning, Huff was placed under surveillance and followed to Tennessee by the FBI. This may have been the most important piece of information of all for the defense, because if Huff was guilty of what the prosecution later claimed, then why was he not arrested when crossing state lines instead of 10 days later? The next morning, Huff and a friend left for Madisonville. He had a Colt 45 in a holster on his belt and an AK-47 in the toolbox of his pickup truck, a truck that was labeled in large letters, Oath Keepers, a constitutionally oriented group aimed at educating law officers, politicians, and military personnel on the importance of the sworn oaths they all took to defend and protect. 2 hours later, a few miles from town, Huff was pulled over by Tennessee Highway Patrolman Michael Wilson for failing to stop at the bottom of the exit ramp. This later proved to be a contrived excuse when Wilson's own dashcam video showed Huff stopping and then the immediate appearance of the FBI's task force team. After more than an hour of peaceful confrontation, Huff was allowed to leave because his guns were legal, he carried a current permit, and had broken no laws. He went home, but 10 days later, Huff was arrested by the FBI. Page 13, AFP on the U.S. food supply. FDA's Deadliest Food Failures by Frank Whalen. Food safety regulations, seemingly a priority of the Obama administration, is lulling Americans into a false sense of security and is probably in part responsible for recent extensive outbreaks of foodborne illnesses. The epidemic of new foodborne illnesses suggests that either the Obama administration is inept at safety, or perhaps America is witnessing a well-thought-out plan to increase control of the U.S. food supply, implement more regulations, and impose new laws during a public health emergency. Consider the following. The Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, signed into law by President Obama on January 4th, directs the Food and Drug Administration to build a new system of food safety oversight, one focused on applying, more comprehensively than ever, the best available science and good common sense to prevent the problems that can make people sick. Clearly, this hasn't happened yet. Judicial Watch reported just how ineffective this law has been, stating, an open-air market sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, features goods contaminated with two of the most common causes of food poisoning, Salmonella and Campylobacter. Both are deadly bacteria found in poultry, which, ironically, is inspected by the USDA. It's the same farmer's market where Michelle Obama launched her heavily promoted healthy eating campaign a few years ago. Food Poison Journal cited the CDC's report that the cantaloupe listeria outbreak caused 123 illnesses and 25 fatalities in what has become the second most deadly foodborne illness outbreak in U.S. history. In addition, they wrote that 13 people have been sickened or killed by E. coli in Greene County, Wisconsin since mid-July. MSNBC points the finger at post-9/11 tunnel vision regarding threats of terrorism, reporting hundreds of agricultural scientists responsible for stopping invasive species at the border were reassigned to anti-terrorism duties in the newly formed Homeland Security Department, a move that scientists say cost billions of dollars in crop damage and eradication efforts from California vineyards to Florida citrus groves. Interestingly, the idea of bioterrorism via food was not considered. Calling such a threat agroterrorism, the FBI hosted an event in April to explore such scenarios. According to a story in Judicial Watch, the world-renowned agroterrorism experts attended this year's symposium have revealed that the United States is currently importing approximately 50% of the entire U.S. food supply. Adding that many of the aforementioned experts are on the government's payroll leaves little room to doubt these statistics. Page 14, AFP on the war against Iraq. Biggest Lies About the Iraq War by Ralph Forbes. It would take many volumes to cover the utter criminal insanity of the Iraq debacle. Here are a few of the biggest of the big lies about the illegal, super expensive, $2 to $4 trillion Iraq War. These cakewalk memories would be hilarious if it were not for the tragic misery they caused. While publicly searching for a peaceful solution, fuck Saddam, we're taking him out. Thus spake George W. Bush to 3 U.S. senators and Condoleezza Rice in March 2002, a year before the invasion. The truth is that for reasons that have a lot to do with the U.S. government bureaucracy, we settled on one issue that everyone could agree on, which was weapons of mass destruction as the core reason. Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz, Vanity Fair interview, May 28, 2003. We're not going to have any casualties. President Bush discussing the Iraq War with Christian Zionist broadcaster Pat Robertson after Robertson told him he should prepare the American people for casualties. We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice on Iraq's supposed nuclear capabilities and the Bush administration's case for war, September 8, 2002. Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed. President Bush standing under a Mission Accomplished banner on the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier, May 2, 2003. It's a slam dunk case. CIA Director George Tenet WMDs as the case for war, December 21, 2002. I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, June 24, 2003. We found the weapons of mass destruction. Bush lied in an interview with Polish TV, May 29, 2003. We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat. Rumsfeld, ABC News interview, March 30, 2003. In Iraq, a ruthless dictator cultivated weapons of mass destruction and the means to deliver them. He gave support to terrorists, had an established relationship with Al-Qaeda. VP Dick Cheney, November 7, 2003. Already, the K report identified dozens of weapons of mass destruction-related program activities and significant amounts of equipment that Iraq concealed. Bush, State of the Union, 2004. Had we to do it over again, we would look at the consequences of catastrophic success, being so successful so fast that an enemy should have surrendered or been done and escaped, and lived to fight another day. Bush telling Time magazine that he underestimated the Iraqi resistance, August 2004. I think they're in the last throes, if you will, of the insurgency. Dick Cheney, June 20, 2005. As you know, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you might want or wish to have at a later time. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld responding to a U.S. soldier serving in Iraq, who asked him why troops had to dig through scrap metal to armor vehicles, December 8, 2004. Page 15, AFP on the war against Iraq. Iraq happy to see U.S. leave by Richard Walker. Lies about troop withdrawal dates keep piling up. Now we learn the exit from Afghanistan may not happen as soon as Obama promised. To deflect attention from his failed promises about that war, he recently claimed victory in Iraq by announcing an end to the war. What he neglected to tell the American public was that the Iraqis told him they were kicking the United States out because he wanted to extend the occupation. Of course, Obama's line was that he was fulfilling a promise to have all troops out of Iraq by the end of 2011, and therefore it was a victory. On the contrary, it was yet another lie. For most of 2011, Obama has been hoping the Iraqis would give him the green light to keep a sizable U.S. force in Iraq through 2012, with the same immunity deal our soldiers and contractors had since the war began. For the Iraqis, such an arrangement was unacceptable. They also knew there was an Israeli component to Obama's desire to void the end of 2011 withdrawal agreement made with George Bush. In the background, Israel and its allies in Congress were lobbying Obama to attack Iran, if not in 2011, then in 2012. Israel reckoned it would be nice to have a sizable U.S. force in Iraq to assist an attack on Iran and to ensure Iraqis did not come to Iran's aid. The Iraqis recognized the Israeli component in Obama's request to keep a force in Iraq beyond the deadline. They first made it clear to him there would never again be immunity for any American military personnel on Iraqi soil. They then threw a bigger wrench into the works. Iraqi leaders told him Muqtada al-Sadr, the cleric Washington once targeted for assassination, would not tolerate American boots in Iraq after 2011 and would unleash his Mahdi army against American forces if they remained. Upon hearing this news, Israel's reaction was to tell Obama he had to stay in Iraq because al-Sadr was modeling himself on the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and would seize power once the U.S. left. But Obama knew by the end of the first week of September the game was up and the Iraqis were not going to give him what Israel wanted. His only option was to pretend to the American public he had been planning all along for a year-end withdrawal from Iraq. Obama did not reveal during his recent hollow Iraq victory announcement that he has approved the sale of billions of dollars worth of jets to the Iraqis. One must wonder, has the president considered the possibility that those planes could someday be used to target the Kurds in the event of a civil war in Iraq? Obama must now sit back as Iran and NATO member Turkey discuss how they plan to jointly confront a Kurdish threat they both say they face from within Iraq. Turkey recently sent forces into northern Iraq to kill Kurdish rebels. Should Turkish and Iranian forces make a joint military push into northern Iraq, there is nothing Obama will be able to do about it. Interestingly, the Israelis have close connections to Kurdish groups that have launched attacks in Iran and Turkey. Israel admits arming Syrian revolutionaries by Richard Walker. News that Israeli weapons are in the hands of Syrian opposition groups should come as no surprise to anyone familiar with Middle East unrest. For decades, Israel has not only interfered openly in the affairs of its neighbors, it has run covert wars in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, to name but a few nations. It has assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists and has supplied terrorist groups as long as they targeted countries it wanted to destabilize. When it comes to Syria, Israel has a vested interest in seeing it collapse into chaos, convinced the overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad regime will undermine Syria's allies, namely Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. It therefore did not come as a shock to pundits when a Syrian envoy to the Arab League revealed Israel has been supplying Syrian insurgents with automatic weapons. The envoy said both Lebanon and Syria had intercepted shipments of Israeli weapons bound for Syrian fighters. Israel has long opposed the Syrian regime and as far back as 2003 used its neocon supporters to convince President Bush he should sanction the overthrow of al-Assad. Dick Cheney has since admitted he was in favor of a plan to bomb Syria because he believed it would weaken Israel's enemies in the region. Syria shares borders with Turkey, Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan, and is a gateway for traffic among all those nations. Israel and its backer in Washington, Barack Obama, would like to put a regime in Syria that allows them to control that gateway. In doing so, they could shut off trade between Lebanon and Iran, which is next door to Iraq. D.C. continues to support Israel's dirty work in the region, even though violence in Syria could quickly spread into Lebanon. It was Israel's 1982 intervention in Lebanon that led Hezbollah to become the organization it is today. Page 17, AFP on the Mideast. Israeli fingerprints obvious in alleged Iranian murder plot by Keith Johnson. The Obama administration continues to stick by their absurd claim that 56-year-old Mansour Arbabsiar, a used car salesman from Round Rock, Texas, was entrusted by the Iranian government to carry out a mafia-style hit on the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. Even FBI Director Robert Mueller admits that the alleged plot reads like the pages of a Hollywood script, and most former intelligence officers who have weighed in on the matter agree. In fact, former CIA case officer Robert Baer went so far as to say, "The Iranian plot is a bad Hollywood script." In a Time magazine article that used that quote as its title, Baer wrote, "None of it measures up to Iran's unsurpassed skill in conducting assassinations. As for motives, there are no convincing ones." Some take it a step further by suggesting that the plot sounds less like something manufactured out of Hollywood and more like something out of Tel Aviv. During a recent television appearance, former CIA intelligence officer Michael Scheuer was asked by Judge Andrew Napolitano who would want to create the impression that the United States needs to engage in military activity against Iran. Scheuer replied, "If I was looking at a counterintelligence operation to decide where this information came from, I'd be very interested to see if I could find an Israeli hand or a Saudi hand." One who has been tracking the Israeli angle in this latest fiasco is Medik Okatel, a U.S. foreign policy and Middle East expert whose website, The Passionate Attachment, focuses on America's unrequited love for Israel. This AFP writer recently corresponded with Okatel to ascertain where his research on the so-called Iranian terror plot has led him. Okatel explained with his analysis of a foreign policy paper entitled Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Toward Iran. It was published in June 2009 by the Saban Center for Middle East Policy, a pro-Israeli think tank established by media mogul Haim Saban. In that paper, 6 pro-Israeli co-authors reveal their frustration with Tehran's unwillingness to provide the requisite provocation to justify an American invasion of Iran, said Okatel. Of particular relevance to the recently uncovered assassination plot is their analysis of Saudi Arabia's reluctance to support military action against Iran, in which they conclude, "It is hard to imagine what it would take to change the Saudis' minds." Another intriguing aspect of this plot that Okatel has been exploring is the would-be assassin's enlistment of the Zetas drug cartel, which he said has been reportedly linked to the Mossad. According to a 2009 article he found in the Spanish-language newspaper Habla Honduras, the secret services of the Israeli military trained several members of the violent wing of the Mexican drug cartels, mainly the Gulf Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel, among whom was Arturo Guzman de Sena, the founder of the group of assassins known as Los Zetas. Okatel has been following other incriminating leads as well. One is the connection between Arbabsiar's co-conspirator, Gholam Shakouri, and the Mossad-linked Mujahideen-e-Khalq, a terrorist organization that opposes the Ahmadinejad government. Another is the Fox Werity scandal in Britain, which reveals a concerted effort by the CIA, Mossad, and MI6 to destabilize the Islamic regime by any means necessary. According to Al-Qatal, this is further evidence that Israel and its foreign lobbies in Britain, the United States, and elsewhere are the only ones pushing for war with Iran. Significantly, it was Whitehall's concerns about the Mossad influencing British policy toward Iran that led to Fox's resignation as defense secretary. When asked which element of this alleged plot sends up the most red flags, Al-Qatal replied, "It's hard to choose one. Israel's fingerprints are all over it." Page 18, Commentary and Opinion. The Readership Council, AFP's Vital Partner, by Vince Ryan. As chairman of the American Free Press Readership Council, AFPRC, I am calling upon council members to renew their membership to celebrate this, our 10th anniversary year, and I'm inviting those of you who aren't AFPRC members to join this group of highly dedicated and patriotic Americans who are the backbone of AFP. It's no secret that big media finds its strength in the support it receives from large corporate advertisers and from powerful international organizations. Although the circulation of major media publications is declining, their influence goes a long way toward molding the opinions of pundits, politicians, and others who want to appear to be informed. Many Americans spend a goodly amount of time and money trying to keep hearth and home above water, but they don't read the right publications that enable them to fill a great void that exists in their lives. AFP fills that void with accurate and honest reporting that has been left open by the bankrupt and declining and infamously corrupt controlled media in America that falsely portrays itself as the voice of the so-called mainstream. Face the fact that dailies such as the Washington Post and the New York Times, and the weekly magazines along with television and radio, are dominated by a tightly knit elite of interlocking families and financial groups that, while guided by their own self-interest, to be sure are always careful to ensure the continuing dominance of our nation's political arena by international plutocrats whose tentacles reach throughout the unconstitutional Federal Reserve System that has ensnared America's monetary system. They control the media by their influence in such groups as Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations, giving them a stranglehold on America and the world. But they do not stand unchallenged. There is a strong voice of opposition to these evil forces, and it is no exaggeration to say that this opposition is the voice of AFP. It is the men and women who are members of the AFP Readership Council who are in the vanguard of vigorous opposition to these peddlers of a global plantation, a new world order. AFP couldn't do it without the support of its readers. So the fact is that AFP is only able to fill the void in real news reporting because you, the supporters of AFP, make it possible. The year 2011 is not only AFP's 10th anniversary, but is also the 10th anniversary of the tragedy of September 11, 2001. And while big media has spent years lying about what happened on that day, AFP pioneered efforts to blow the whistle on what really happened on 9/11. Our writers and editors have spared no efforts at calling the government liars. AFP readers recognize there is high-level corruption within our own government. It's not just something you see in the movies. Support AFP's efforts to bring out the truth by joining the AFP Readership Council. As a council member, you will have real input suggesting subjects and stories to our editors and writers. America is in trouble. Uncontrolled immigration, millions of jobs sent overseas to cheap slave labor, elected officials who do only what their handlers and big contributors tell them to do, as well as costly no-win wars such as Afghanistan and Iraq. American Free Press must carry on the fight for liberty. Join the AFP Readership Council today. Current council members, please renew your memberships now. If you are an American citizen 18 years or older, you are eligible to join the American Free Press Readership Council. Membership costs $76 per year. Your AFP subscription is included free with membership. You can pay $76 today, or you can break that into two $38 semi-annual payments, or you can pay $7 per month automatically on your credit card. Call 888-699-NEWS. Send cash, check, or money order to AFPRC, 645 Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, number 100, Washington, D.C. 20003. Gaddafi was a nationalist hero, not a villain, by Peter Papaheraclis. On October 20th, one of the last remaining populist world leaders, Muammar Gaddafi, allegedly was cut down by globalist thugs. The murderers patted themselves on the back for their achievement. What crimes did Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein before him commit, except having been in charge of countries with an abundance of quality oil? Was it that they refused to succumb to the usury racket, or that they were unspoken about Israel's bullying of the Palestinians? Hussein was accused of having weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, but the WMDs were non-existent. Gaddafi's alleged crimes were ambiguous. ambiguous. Some cite the bombing of a German discotheque and the bombing of Flight 103. Subsequent investigations showed the allegations were unfounded. In the disco case, the trial revealed that at least 2 of the 5 suspects were CIA and Mossad agents, and the other 3 were protected by U.S. intelligence agencies. In the Lockerbie bombing, a witness publicly recanted his testimony, admitting that he was paid $4 million to lie at the trial. Gaddafi's home was bombed by the U.S. Air Force in 1986, killing 30 civilians including his daughter. In more recent NATO attempts on his life, one of his sons and 3 granddaughters were killed. Most Americans are not aware how good the Libyans had it under Gaddafi. In his 42 years of serving Libya as the brother leader of the revolution, he took it from being the poorest country in the world to having the highest standard of living in all of Africa, and ahead of Russia, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. Education was free. The government would even pay for studies abroad. Healthcare was free for all Libyans. Electricity was also free for everyone. The price of gasoline was 14 cents a gallon. A loaf of bread cost less than half a cent. If someone bought a new car, the state would pay half the cost. Newlyweds received $50,000 toward the purchase of a home, and those wishing to engage in farming got free land, a free house, free equipment, livestock, and seeds. A portion of Libyan oil sales was credited directly to the bank accounts of all citizens. If a university graduate was unable to find employment after graduation, the state would pay the average salary of the profession until employment was found. Even more amazing were Libya's banking policies, which might explain why it was targeted. All bank loans were interest-free. The central bank was state-owned and was not controlled by the Rothschilds. Money was interest-free, and as a result, Libya had 0 national debt, not a penny owed to anyone. Not only did Libya have no national debt, but it had a $150 billion surplus. Literacy rates went from 20 to 83%. Another reason Libya was attacked was that Gaddafi broke rule number 1 in the global power establishment. He was working to change payment for oil away from the U.S. dollar. That is the one thing the U.S. can never allow, because the dollar is the international reserve currency for the purchase of oil. No, Gaddafi was not the dictator we've been led to believe, nor was he a terrorist. The only terror he spread was in the banking headquarters of the global establishment.